Bob Dylan's voice echoed in the small room. Bruce Springsteen understood he'd been trying to say the wrong things all along. And that night, he let everything go. 1964. Freehold, New Jersey. A bedroom above a family's living room. 14 years old. A transistor radio on a wooden nightstand. The dial glowing soft blue in the darkness. Bruce had been playing guitar for 2 years. He was good. People said so. His band, the Castiles, played school dances, church basements, anywhere that would have them. They did covers mostly. Beach Boys, Beatles. The clean, pretty stuff that made girls smile and parents nod approvingly. Bruce could sing those songs. He had the voice for it. Smooth enough. Controlled. He hit the notes. He made it sound like the records. But something felt wrong. Had felt wrong for months. A wrongness he couldn't name. He'd been practicing that night. Working on a new song the band wanted to add to their set. Something upbeat. Something safe. His fingers moved across the strings with practiced confidence. The chords were right. The rhythm was tight. Everything was correct. And then the radio DJ said a name. "Here's a new one from a folk singer out of New York. Bob Dylan. This is the Times They Are A-Changin. The first note came through the tiny speaker. Acoustic guitar. Simple. Direct. And then the voice. Bruce's fingers stopped moving. The voice that came through that radio wasn't smooth. Wasn't controlled. Wasn't trying to be pretty or safe or correct. It was cracked. Raw. Almost ugly in its honesty. Bruce sat completely still on the edge of his bed, his guitar resting against his chest, and listened. Come gather round people wherever you roam. The voice didn't ask permission. Didn't apologize for its roughness. And admit that the waters around you have grown. It just told the truth. Unvarnished. Uncomfortable. Undeniable. Bruce's guitar began to slip from his hands. He didn't notice. Didn't reach to catch it. Just let it slide until it rested on the floor beside his feet. When the song ended, 3 minutes and 14 seconds that rewired something fundamental in his brain, Bruce sat in silence. The radio DJ was talking again. Introducing another song. Bruce reached over and turned it off. The room was quiet now except for the sound of his own breathing. He looked at his guitar on the floor. At the songbook open on his bed. Full of the clean, acceptable songs his band had been practicing. At the window showing darkness outside, the streetlight casting long shadows. Dylan didn't explain himself. He never did. Bruce picked up his guitar. Held it. Looked at it like he was seeing it for the first time. For 2 years, he'd been learning to play correctly. To sing on pitch. To make music that sounded like other people's music. Dylan's voice had done none of those things. And yet it had done something else entirely. Something Bruce didn't have a word for yet. It had told the truth. Not a truth. Not his truth. Just truth. The kind that makes you uncomfortable because you recognize it even when you don't want to. Bruce set the guitar down carefully. He stood up. Walked to his window and looked out at Freehold's empty streets. Tomorrow was Thursday. The Castiles had practice scheduled. They were supposed to work on that new song, the upbeat one, the safe one, the one that would make people smile. Bruce knew, standing at that window, that he couldn't do it anymore. Not because he couldn't play it. He could. He was good enough. But because after hearing Bob Dylan's voice crack and strain and refuse to be pretty while it told the truth, Bruce understood that every song he'd been singing was a lie. Not a malicious lie. Just a comfortable one. The kind everyone tells because it's easier than the alternative. He went to bed that night without practicing anymore. Lay in the darkness listening to cars pass on the street below. Thinking about that voice. About what it meant to sing like that. Like you'd rather lose your voice entirely than use it to say something false. The next morning, Bruce told his mother he was sick. Stayed home from school. Sat in his room with his guitar and tried to play something, anything that felt as true as what he'd heard on the radio. Everything that came out sounded wrong now. Hollow. Imitative. By Thursday afternoon, when his bandmates showed up for practice, Bruce had made his decision. They set up in the garage like always. Amps. Drums. Microphones. The familiar ritual of musicians preparing to make familiar sounds. "You ready to nail this new one?" Tommy, the drummer, asked, spinning his sticks. Bruce was sitting on an overturned crate, his guitar across his lap, not plugged in. "I can't do this anymore," he said. The garage went quiet. "Do what?" Tommy asked. These songs. This version of music." His bandmates looked at each other. Eddie, the bass player, laughed nervously. "What are you talking about? We sound good. We're getting better. We sound like copies," Bruce said. His voice was quiet but certain. "We sound like we're trying to be other people. And I heard something yesterday that made me realize I can't keep doing that." "What did you hear?" "Bob Dylan." Tommy frowned. "That folk guy? The one who can't sing?" Bruce looked up. "He can sing. He just doesn't sing like everyone else. He sings like he means it. Like the words matter more than the melody. And everything we do is backwards. We care about sounding good more than saying something real." Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. The band tried to argue. They were getting gigs. Making a little money. Building a reputation. Why would they throw that away? Bruce tried to explain. About truth and imitation. About the difference between making music and making noise that sounds like other people's music. About hearing something so honest it makes everything else feel like a performance. They didn't understand. Couldn't understand. They were 15, 16 years old, playing rock and roll in New Jersey in 1964. The goal was to sound like the records. That's what people wanted. The practice ended early. Awkward. Tense. The Castiles continued without Bruce. Found another guitar player. Kept playing the same circuit of school dances and church basements. Bruce spent the next 3 months alone in his room. Playing. Writing. Throwing away everything that sounded like imitation. Keeping only what felt like truth, even when the truth sounded rough and uncertain and nothing like the radio. His parents worried. His friends stopped calling. People at school whispered that he'd quit the band, that he was wasting his talent, that he'd gone weird. Bruce didn't try to explain. How could he explain that Dylan's voice had shown him something irreversible? That once you hear someone refuse to compromise truth for beauty, you can't unhear it? 6 months later, Bruce formed a new band. Different kind of music. Different kind of songs. Songs about freehold. About working-class lives. About the specific, concrete truth of the world he actually lived in rather than the generic sentiments of top 40 radio. The new band didn't get as many gigs at first. The songs made people uncomfortable. Too specific. Too raw. Too honest. But something else started happening. When Bruce sang now, in that voice that had learned from Dylan's that roughness could be more true than smoothness, people listened differently. Not with the distant enjoyment of background music. With attention. Recognition. The shock of hearing their own lives described with precision. Away from the spotlight, Dylan made a choice no one expected. Years later, 1975. Bruce Springsteen had become what people called a voice of a generation. Born to Run had made him famous. Magazine covers. Concert tours. The weight of expectation. He was in a recording studio in New York. Working on new material. Fighting with producers about arrangements, and commercial viability, and whether the songs were accessible enough. In the middle of an argument, the phone rang. The studio manager answered. Looked confused. "Bruce? There's someone here who wants to see you. Says it's important. He says he's Bob Dylan." The room went silent. Bruce walked to the studio door. Opened it. Bob Dylan stood in the hallway. Older now. Worn. That same face that had stared out from album covers Bruce had studied for hours as a teenager. "Hey," Dylan said. His voice still carried that distinctive quality, rough, direct, unpolished. "Heard you were working. Thought I'd stop by." Bruce couldn't speak for a moment. This was the man whose voice through a transistor radio had destroyed and rebuilt his understanding of music. "Come in," Bruce finally managed. Dylan walked into the studio. Looked around at the equipment, the musicians, the engineers. Nodded to himself like he was confirming something. Then he looked at Bruce. Really looked at him. In that way Dylan had of seeing through performance to the person underneath. "They giving you shit about commercial appeal?" Dylan asked. Bruce laughed, surprised. "How did you know?" "Because that's what they do. They hear something true and their first instinct is to make it prettier. Safer. More like everything else." Dylan pulled a cigarette from his pocket but didn't light it. Just held it. "You can let them. Lot of people do. Make a good living saying things that sound meaningful without actually meaning anything. I don't want to do that," Bruce said. "I know. I heard your record. That's why I'm here." Dylan finally lit the cigarette. Took a drag. "Wanted to tell you something nobody told me when I was starting. When you refuse to compromise truth for beauty, people will hate you for a while. They'll call you unpolished. Say you can't sing. Tell you you're throwing away your talent." Bruce nodded. He'd heard all of that. Was still hearing it. "But then," Dylan continued, "something happens. The people who need the truth, really need it, not just people who enjoy music as background noise, they find you. And they hold on to what you give them because it's the only real thing in a world full of pretty lies." He stubbed out his cigarette. Turned to leave. "Dylan," Bruce called. "That song. The Times They Are A-Changin. The one I heard on the radio when I was 14. Did you know what it would do? Did you know people would hear it and have to rebuild everything they thought they knew about music?" Dylan stopped. Looked back. Something that might have been a smile crossed his face. "I just knew I couldn't sing it any other way," he said. "Same as you. Once you hear the truth, you can't unhear it. You either spend your life pretending you didn't hear it, or you spend your life trying to say it out loud. You chose right." He left. Disappeared back into the New York night. Bruce stood in that studio for a long time after. Thinking about a 14-year-old kid in Freehold who quit his band because a voice on the radio showed him the difference between making music and telling the truth. What followed stayed with everyone who witnessed it, long after the sound faded. Bruce went back into the studio. Told the producers they were doing the songs his way. No compromise. No softening. If it felt true, it stayed. If it felt like imitation, no matter how commercial, it went. Some of the producers quit. Others stayed. The album took longer. Cost more. But when it was done, it was real. That transistor radio, the one from Bruce's bedroom in 1964, he kept it. Never threw it away. When he bought his first house with music money, he put it on a shelf in his home studio. Not as decoration. As reminder. Reminder that the bravest thing you can do is quit everything that feels like a comfortable lie and rebuild from truth, even when truth sounds rough and unfinished and nothing like what people expect. In 2016, Bruce Springsteen stood on stage accepting an award. Lifetime Achievement. Decades of music that had told the truth about American life. During his speech, he said, "When I was 14, I heard Bob Dylan's voice for the first time. And I quit my band that night. Not because I wanted to stop making music, but because I realized I'd been making the wrong kind. Dylan taught me that your voice cracking while telling the truth is worth more than perfect pitch singing comfortable lies." The audience applauded. But Bruce wasn't finished. "That radio is still in my studio. And some nights, when I'm tempted to make something prettier than it should be, I look at it and remember, once you hear the truth, you can't unhear it. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Bob Dylan never commented publicly on that story. He didn't need to. Years later, someone asked Bruce what he'd do differently if he could go back to 1964. He thought for a long moment. "I'd quit the band faster," he said. The transistor radio sits on that shelf still. A reminder that the most important thing you can quit is the version of yourself that isn't telling the truth.